Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and today we're going through my top 10 breakout candidates in the SEC this year. I'm not including any quarterbacks. There's a ton of first-year quarterbacks or just returning quarterbacks who could really fit this bill, but it feels way more entertaining to go through the non-quarterbacks in the league who could make a serious name for themselves this fall. Just before we get into that list, if you have been enjoying all this football content and you want more SEC preview stuff every single day until we kick off in August, subscribe to me here and follow me on Twitter. I'm doing this every single day, so come hang out and tell me when you think I'm wrong about what we're talking about ahead of the football season. But let's just get straight into it. The top 10 breakout candidates. At number 10, I have Amari Williams, who is at Mississippi State. Now, he is an edge rusher. Transferring over from FSU, obviously. He's 6'4", 240 as a junior. And in Tallahassee, it was interesting. He would split reps at defensive end and tight end. So you kind of had a weird skew of his numbers because in 2025 with the Noles, he only had 10 tackles, a sack and a half. But he really actually played the majority of his snaps at tight end. Now, a part of that can just be attributed to Florida State is doing whatever the hell they're doing up in Tallahassee, so you have this really quality edge rusher playing out at tight end, but he was decent at tight end, which I think just kind of shows his versatility, his all-around athletic ability, and just sort of what he can be, dynamically as a football player. So you're looking ahead to this season now with the Bulldogs, and why I think he can really be a good breakout. He has some really good help with him on the defensive line. A healthy Will Whitson is going to be back for Mississippi State coming off the other edge, and they have Texas A&M transfer Dylan Evans there on the inside. So he's going to have plenty of one-on-one opportunities, and I just think with being able to fully commit his entire training regimen, his practices, to being a good edge rusher and not splitting reps in Indy between DN and tight end, he's going to really be able to elevate his game. And with that help on Mississippi State's defensive line, he'll be in one-on-one situations, and he'll be able to make some pretty good noise. So for that reason, I have Amari Williams at my number 10 on the breakout list for this fall. Moving up to number 9, I've got Kayan Lee, who is a corner for Tennessee. So another transfer here. There's a lot of transfers on this list. You'll notice that theme pretty quickly. But he is coming over from Auburn to Tennessee. And after his junior campaign with the Tigers, he allowed 0 touchdowns over 328 coverage snaps. That is pretty good. He's 5'11", 183 as a senior, and he's entering this Vols defense that is led by Jim Knowles, who they hired, defensive coordinator, over from Penn State, and Knowles brought a ton of Penn State talent over with him on the defensive side of the ball. But he looked at Kayan Lee coming from Auburn, and he said that I want him to be one of my top 2 corners. And I say one of the top 2 because also part of why I think Kayan can have a good year is because across from him is Ty Redmond in that Vols secondary, who was freshman All-American last year. So with Redmond on one side and Lee on the other, Tennessee's secondary as a whole is incredibly talented. And just with that black hole over there in Redmond, Lee's going to have plenty of opportunity to show what he can do. And that can be a good or a bad thing based on how quality the corner is. But like I said, Lee allowing 0 touchdowns over 300-plus cover snaps last year, I think it'll be a good thing. He'll really be able to show what he can do in coverage. So it's an upgraded Vols defense overall, which is going to obviously help that secondary be able to anticipate in jump routes and be more aggressive. And I believe that Kayan Lee is going to be one of those really important factors in terms of turning that Vols defense around. And at number 8, I've got another transfer. It's Jaden Gibson at South Carolina. Now, that's a name that you probably haven't heard very much, and that's because he was with Oklahoma, but he hasn't played a game since 2023. He was dealing with a bunch of major injuries. He left Oklahoma's program halfway through last season, but go back to when he was healthy. In 2023, he caught 14 passes for 5 touchdowns, but it was 26.8 yards per catch. He is one of the most explosive players in the country. He's 6'5", 200 pounds. So he's this massive guy out wide. His frame makes him uncoverable one-on-one. And why I'm so excited about him is because South Carolina already has Nick Harbor in that receiver room. And the only thing better than one uncoverable alien in your receiver room is 2 of them. Because you already had to double Nick Harbor if you're an opposing secondary, because he will just beat any corner. Now you kind of have to do the same thing with Jaden Gibson, where he's just so much bigger, he's so much longer, and he's very quick, to where it's really hard to cover him one-on-one. So you're almost at a point where you kind of have to pick which guy you want to leave on an island, whether it's Harbor or Jaden Gibson. And you really just can't commit to one of them, because then the other one will burn you all day long. So if Gibson's able to stay healthy, which obviously has been his biggest question since 2023, he forms an unbelievable duo with Nick Harbor and himself that's going to really elevate South Carolina's passing game. So not only can Gibson really elevate Carolina as a whole, he can really boost up his draft stock to be a very high pick because of his athletic frame and his potential. So Jaden Gibson staying healthy is going to be a massive storyline for Carolina this year because he and Nick Harbor as a tandem form a lethal duo. So moving up to number 7 here, staying on offense, I've got Caleb Odom at Ole Miss. This is the first non-immediate transfer of this list because he began his career at Alabama, did Odom, but before last season he went over to Oxford and he had 19 grabs for 197 yards and 2 scores last year. And why I think this is the year that he can finally, crack the national conversation and really get it right is because he's committing to being a tight end. I talked about a Mary Williams going between tight end and defensive end. Odom to a smaller, not quite as severe, but he was between tight end and receiver for a while. He's 6'5", 215, so that size is decently similar to Jaden Gibson's. Like I just said, but Odom got 15 more pounds. He was recruited as a tight end, a very highly rated recruit at tight end out of high school, and that's where he's going back to. And I'm so excited about it because obviously Ole Miss has tons of weapons. They have to respect that running game with Keywan Lacey and now the depth in that running back room. They have a bunch of transfer receivers coming in. Obviously, Trinidad Chambliss is still there. But Odom, he was such a highly rated recruit because when I went back and I was watching his high school tape, I was watching him as a recruit evaluating him. One of my first thoughts was, this guy is Kyle Pitts. Like the plays that he was making were just like 2020 Kyle Pitts with the Florida Gators. He's that kind of athlete. He's that dynamic. He's that uncoverable. So having that, that jackknife coming running up the middle of the field for Ole Miss's offense is going to make it so much more dangerous. And I believe that Odom, not only is it going to be that sort of threat that you have to worry about, I believe he's going to be one of the threats that defenses have to try and answer. And I'm not sure there's going to be much of an answer for it. So I think Odom can really turn some heads this year and be one of the more dynamic tight ends in the conference, maybe only second to a guy who I have higher up on this list. But up to number 6, we have another transfer going back to defense here. It's Anto Saka, who was with Texas A&M this year after beginning his first 3 years at Northwestern. Coming off the edge, and in his first 3 years with the Wildcats, he had 41 tackles and 12 sacks. And now he moves up to the SEC. And part of why I think that Saka belonged on this list is because he's in the system now that just produced Cassius Howell last season. And comparing the size of those two, Cassius Howell was 6'2", 248 pounds last year with the Aggies. Saka is 6'4", 255. So he's got 2 inches and almost 10 pounds on who was one of the best edge rushers in the conference last year. So he's in that fit. He's in Mike Elko's scheme. He's on that Aggies defense that is full of talent. Even though some of us got banged up in the spring, A&M's defense is still going to be A&M's defense. So now that Saka's moving up to the SEC, there's going to be a lot more eyes on him. There's going to be a lot more, just NFL profiling around him because of the players that are going to be on his team and on other teams. He's going to have so many eyes on him this year, and I believe that he could have a better year than Cassius Howell did. My only gripe with him is that he needs a bit more of a pass rush plan to be a little more intentional with the moves that he makes. But, without a really good plan, he's had 12 sacks over 3 years. So imagine if he's able to develop that and really take the Cassius Howell route, he can be lethal this year because Howell came up from Bowling Green to A&M, high draft pick, elite pass rusher. I think Saka could do the exact same thing. So look out for Anto Saka coming off the edge in College Station this fall. Moving up to number 5 now, still on defense, another transfer from the Big Ten actually. It's Bo Masco from Rutgers. He is a corner who is now with the Texas Longhorns. The Rutgers DB, so he was a top 5 corner in the portal. And that was for a really good reason. He was all Big Ten honorable mention last year, and he practically shuts down half the field. So you look at his box score, he let him blow you away. A lot of people are still in that trap of corners having small box scores. They're not very good. That means a corner is doing his job. It means no one's throwing to him. They're not even giving him a chance to break up a pass, tackle a receiver, pick a ball off. He's absolutely shut down. And now he gets to go to a Will Muschamp defense with the Longhorns. One of the best schemes in the country and one of the most talented defenses in the country because that front seven, that pass rush with guys like Colin Simmons, Hiro Kanu on the D-line, Ty Anthony Smith at linebacker, that pressure that the front seven is going to be putting on opposing offenses is going to allow every Texas DB to be incredibly aggressive and incredibly anticipatory in terms of, that's a made-up word, I think, but really anticipate the routes that receivers are running to try and jump passes for picks. And really get aggressive in terms of pass breakups. And not just keeping the receiver in front of you, but going and getting that football. Masco is incredibly good at that. So we've already seen that he can shut down a field and make quarterbacks not want to throw to him. But what's going to happen when they're forced to because Colin Simmons is about to take their head off? I think Masco could really have a massive stat year. And you're really just going to have to watch your wide receiver one vanish when they play against Texas. But my number 4 on this list maybe is one receiver who might not vanish if he does play Bo Masco, or when he does. But that's Dallas Wilson of the Florida Gators. Now, this is the only guy so far on this list who's never transferred. But Dallas, he was a true freshman last season. He was one of the best receiver recruits in that cycle, and he lived up to the hype when he was on the field last year. Now, the bad news there is that he only played in 4 games. He was incredibly beat up. He didn't start until like week 4 or 5 last season, and he was only able to play that middle batch of games before being sidelined again for the rest of the year. But in that limited action, in just 4 games, he caught 12 passes for 174 yards and 3 touchdowns, including some just ridiculous plays. That win that Florida had against Texas in Gainesville, he looked like a superstar receiver who'd been doing it for years. It was his college debut. He's 6'3", 213. He's stronger than every DB. We saw a play against the Longhorns where he pushed a guy down and then shook off 2 or 3 tacklers. He's faster than most DBs. We saw him blaze through them. If he is fully healthy, he could be one of the best receivers in the country already. And he's in a Florida receiver room that is absolutely loaded with talent and depth. So you really can't just commit to Dallas and leave the other guys alone because then you'll get burned. So Dallas should have plenty of one-on-one opportunities to do more of what we saw against Texas last year. And hopefully for him and for the Gators, their quarterback situation does get ironed out with a really good, consistent passer because every other piece on that Florida offense is really, really good. So Dallas, I think, could be in for a massive breakout year, assuming he's able to stay healthy. Then number 3, we're going back to defense here. It's Rayshawn Pleasant with the Auburn Tigers. He's a 5'11" senior from West Monroe, Louisiana, and he's one of the most versatile players in the SEC. He showed up in 11 games for Auburn last year at corner, but he was also their primary return man. And he led the SEC in total return yards, in average yards per return. So he's one of the most explosive athletes with the ball in his hands in the country. He had a 98-yard kickoff return for a touchdown in that opener against Baylor. And he was among that handful of good players who stayed at Auburn during the coaching change and didn't hit that portal when they hired Alex Golesh. So he's both a lockdown corner and an electrifying return man. It's pretty hard to find any player ever who gets, his first team All-SEC at special teams and also was, DB of the week in multiple instances last season. And Pleasant is one of those guys. So Rayshawn, as both a lockdown corner and a return man, he can turn the game on his head all by himself. And I think with another year to really develop, really be able to hone in on all those skills, he can be incredibly dangerous and an absolute game breaker of an athlete. Then my number 2 breakout candidate this fall is Trey'Dez Green from the LSU Tigers. Now, I almost thought about not putting him on this list because he's already a pretty big name with proven production. But why I really believe he qualifies as a breakout is because even though he had a great year last year, his potential hasn't even been realized yet. He's 6'7", 240 pounds. And he's originally from Louisiana. He loves LSU and LSU loves him. And he's really been kind of a red zone jump ball threat so far in his career. Last year, he had 33 catches, for 433 yards and 7 scores. But when Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss came over, they're now in charge of calling that offense. They immediately publicly said, yeah, Trey'Dez is going to be heavily emphasized. He's going to be incredibly utilized in a lot more parts of the game plan. So that means less situational usage just in jump balls or third downs, just get the ball up to him to gain 8 or 9 yards. And that means just more consistent usage everywhere across the field. Now, I've talked about a couple of receivers in this being uncoverable mismatches. Trey'Dez is the definition of that. 6'7", 240. He should be playing power forward. But instead, which actually he did for LSU, but now he's just playing tight end and he's dominating defenses. So as long as LSU's offense runs at least semi-smoothly, which I think it definitely should, and Green is healthy, I think he can have one of the better seasons from a tight end that we can really recall in recent memory. He's that kind of athlete. He's that kind of mismatch. And that's really what, is able to dominate games in this era of college football. And then my top breakout candidate ahead of the 2026 season is a guy who hasn't even played a snap of football yet. It's Cedarian Morgan, the receiver at Alabama. He's a true freshman from Alexander City, Alabama. He is 6'4", 223. So he's already the biggest guy in Bama's receiver room as a true freshman. And he was a blue chip guy, either a 4-star or a 5-star based on whichever service you look at. And his senior year stats, playing with Benjamin Russell, he caught 82 passes for over 1,400 yards, which is breaking 17 yards per catch. And he had 16 touchdowns as a senior. He's also a track athlete, so he's fast enough. He's a 2-time state qualifier in the high jump. He was second in high school as a junior in the 6A championships for track and field. So he's a freak of an athlete. He's crazy fast. He's crazy dynamic. He's crazy explosive. He has all those tendencies that you want in a receiver going into the NFL draft. But he's just a true freshman. He's been turning heads in spring camp, for weeks now. He did incredible at A-Day. So Darian Morgan, he joins that room with Ryan Williams, Latsier Brooks, Noah Rogers when they get him back. Morgan, I think, could be the best of the bunch already. He has that kind of ceiling where I believe he could pass Ryan Coleman Williams as Bama's number one in just a few weeks if he's able to stay healthy and develop how we think he is. Morgan is that good of an athlete. He's that good of a prospect. So get ready for Darian Morgan to really take over that Bama passing game. Now, again, he's also pretty dependent, kind of like Dallas Wilson, on is their quarterback situation good? Between Austin Mack and Keelan Russell, which one gets that job, and are they a consistent enough passer to be able to get Sadie the ball? I hope they are because Morgan could be one of the best pass catchers in the conference already. So that'll be it for our top 10 breakout players ahead of this fall that aren't quarterbacks. We'll go through quarterbacks at some point, but I mean, going through the non-QBs just give us way more range, way more freedom to talk about a bunch of names I'm really excited to see. So if you did enjoy this video, and like I said before, you want daily college football and SEC content until we kick off, subscribe to me here and follow me on Twitter. I'm doing this every single day till August. I've been Will Thomas, and I will see you next time.